Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast. Today we're going deep on the structure of the U.S. government.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it seems like maybe someone out there is trying to understand how power is balanced, in America.
Like prepping for a civics test, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe just curious about how it all works.
Right.
Whatever the reason, I have a feeling this deep dive is going to be super helpful.
Awesome.
I've been looking at all kinds of things like notes and study guides and FAQs,
Oh, wow.
all to get ready for this and to help us connect all the dots. I've got an expert here with me
Happy to be here.
who can really shed some light on the intricacies of the American government.
You know what I find really fascinating is that this isn't just about memorizing names and dates and stuff.
Right.
It's about uncovering the principles behind how American democracy works.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
one thing that keeps popping up in all the materials is this idea of the U.S. government being divided into three branches:
Okay.
the executive, the legislative, and the judicial.
Right.
So what's the big idea behind this three-part structure?
Well, it's all about preventing any one person or group from having all the power.
Okay.
You see, the founding fathers, the guys who created this whole system, they were really worried about tyranny.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they had just fought a revolution to get away from a king.
Right.
So they wanted to make sure that power was spread out and nobody could become too powerful.
Got it.
That's where this idea of separation of powers comes in.
Separation of powers. Okay.
Yeah.
So each branch has its own, specific powers and responsibilities.
Exactly. It's like, think of a three-legged stool.
Okay.
You need all three legs to keep the stool stable, right?
Right.
The executive, legislative, and judicial, they all have to work together.
And that's where this term checks and balances comes in.
Yes,
I've
exactly.
seen that everywhere.
So checks and balances, those are the ways that each branch can kind of limit the power of the other two.
Oh, okay.
It's like a system of accountability.
So can you give us a real world example of how those checks and balances actually work?
Sure. So let's say Congress wants to make a new law.
Okay.
Congress is the legislative branch, right?
Right.
They write up the law and vote on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the president, who's the head of the executive branch,
Right.
can veto that law if they don't like it.
Oh, so the president can just say no to a law.
Exactly. That's a pretty big check on Congress's power right there.
Wow. So what happens if Congress really, really wants that law to pass?
Well, they can try to override the president's veto.
Oh, is that hard to do?
It takes a supermajority vote, which means 2/3 of both the House of Representatives and the Senate have to agree.
So it's not easy.
No, it's not, and that's by design.
Interesting.
It makes sure that overriding a veto only happens if there's a really strong agreement in Congress.
Okay, so there's this back and forth between the branches.
Right.
It's like they're always negotiating to make sure nobody gets too much power. What about the judicial branch, the Supreme Court? What do they do in all of this?
The Supreme Court has a really unique and important job.
Okay.
They have the power of judicial review.
Judicial review.
Yeah, it means they can look at laws that Congress has passed and actions the president has taken and decide if they're constitutional.
Constitutional.
Yeah, if they agree with the Constitution, which is the highest law in the country.
Right.
So they basically act as the guardian of the Constitution.
Oh.
If they find that a law or action goes against the Constitution,
Yeah.
they can strike it down.
So they can overrule Congress and the president.
Yeah, it's a big power.
That's a huge power.
It is, but it's super important.
Okay.
Judicial review makes sure that everything the government does follows the Constitution, and it protects individual rights.
Wow. So it prevents the other branches from doing things that violate the basic principles of American democracy.
Exactly.
This reminds me of something I saw in an FAQ I was reading.
Oh, yeah.
It said that this whole three-branch system with its checks and balances isn't unique to the United States.
That's right. Lots of democratic countries around the world use a system like this.
Really?
Yeah, they've adopted this model to separate government powers to create a balance and prevent tyranny.
Wow. It's amazing how this structure that was created so long ago is still being used today in so many places.
It's a classic.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And for all of you listening out there who are finding this as fascinating as I am, don't forget to subscribe, and share this episode.
Yes, please do.
You can also find Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube.
We're everywhere.
We'll have lots more insights to share as we keep going with this exploration of the U.S. government.
Looking forward to it.
So to recap this, the president heads the executive branch.
Right.
Congress makes up the legislative branch. And the Supreme Court leads the judicial branch.
Three branches working together.
Exactly. Hopefully. All right, let's dive a little deeper into how these checks and balances have played out in real life.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
What are some examples of times when these checks have actually come into play?
Well, there are tons of examples throughout history, but let's start with a recent one you might remember, the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, yeah, Obamacare.
Exactly. That was a huge
It
deal.
was constantly in the news, so much debate.
So much controversy.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect illustration of checks and balances in action.
Okay, how so?
Well, the Affordable Care Act was passed by Congress
Right.
after a long and heated debate. I mean, it was a big fight.
Yeah.
But then it faced all these legal challenges, some of which went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Oh, wow, so the Supreme Court got involved.
Yeah, they ultimately decided that the law was constitutional, so it stayed.
Okay.
But all those legal battles show how the different branches can push back against each other
Right.
and how the courts play this crucial role in making sure the law follows the Constitution.
That's a really great example of how these checks and balances work in the real world.
Yeah, it's not just a theory. It has a direct impact on the laws that affect all of us.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that the system is always being tested and refined.
Right. New situations come up, things
Oh.
change, and the branches of government have to figure out how to interpret and apply the Constitution in this changing world.
It's amazing how this structure, designed over 200 years ago, is still relevant today.
Yeah, it's pretty adaptable.
So this system is brilliant. But what does it mean for us as individuals?
That's a great question.
We've been talking about the president and Congress and the Supreme Court.
The big players.
But where do we, the people, fit into all of this?
That gets to the heart of American democracy.
Okay.
The whole system is based on the idea that the people have the power.
Right. We, the people.
Exactly. We get to choose our representatives through elections. We can hold them accountable for what they do.
Right.
And we can demand that they represent our interests.
So it's not just about those three branches.
No, it's about all of us.
It's about all of us working together to make sure our government works for us.
That's it. And it reminds us that democracy isn't something we just watch.
Right.
It's something we participate in.
We have to stay informed and engaged.
Exactly. We got to vote, have discussions,
Right.
hold our elected officials accountable.
So that our government truly reflects the people it serves.
That's the goal.
I love that. And that's what this deep dive is all about, empowering ourselves with knowledge so that we can be better citizens.
Knowledge is power.
It is. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about more real-world examples of these checks and balances in action.
Can't wait.
And we'll go even deeper into each branch.
Buckle up, everyone.
Stay tuned.
It's really fascinating to look closer at these branches, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It makes you appreciate how smart the founding fathers were
Right.
when they designed this whole system.
Yeah.
So let's start with the executive branch.
Yeah.
We talked about the president's power to veto laws.
Right.
What other roles and responsibilities do they have?
Well, the veto power is a big one.
Yeah.
It lets the president stop laws they think are bad. But that's not all they do. They're also the commander-in-chief of the military.
Oh, wow. So the president decides when and where to send troops?
They do. It's a big responsibility.
That's a lot of power.
It is, but it's important to remember that the president can't just declare war on their own.
Right. Congress has to do that.
Exactly, another check.
So it's a shared responsibility when it comes to using the military.
Yes, very carefully considered.
Makes sense. The founding fathers were really smart about making sure no one person had too much power,
For sure, they knew how dangerous that could be.
especially when it comes to war.
Right.
So what about other things the president does, like treaties with other countries?
The president can negotiate and sign treaties, but the Senate has to approve them.
Ah, there's that check again.
It's all about balance.
It seems like almost everything the president does needs approval from someone else
That's the whole point of checks and balances.
to make sure no one person can just do whatever they want.
Exactly, even the president.
So what about appointing judges, like to the Supreme Court?
That's another interesting one.
Does the president just get to choose whoever they want?
Well, they can nominate people they think would be good Supreme Court justices, people who are qualified and, have good legal minds and all that.
Right.
But those nominations have to be confirmed by the Senate.
So the Senate gets to say yes or no to the president's choices.
Exactly. It's another layer of checks and balances.
I make sure the Supreme Court has judges that a lot of people agree on.
Exactly. It prevents the president from just putting their friends on the court.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it helps make sure the court is balanced and impartial.
This system is so complicated, but in a good way.
Yeah, it's like a dance.
It is a dance of power.
Each branch has its own role, and they work together, but they also keep each other in check.
It's amazing, and it really helps prevent anyone from abusing their power.
It's all about accountability.
Right, so let's move on to the legislative branch, Congress.
Okay, the people's branch.
They're the ones who make the laws, right?
They are, and it's a fascinating process.
I bet it's more complicated than just having an idea and writing it down.
Oh, yeah, much more.
It has to be. right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are the laws that govern the whole country.
There's a whole system to make sure those laws are carefully considered and reflect what the people want.
So walk us through it. How does a bill become a law?
Okay, so first, a member of Congress introduces a bill, which is basically an idea for a law. Then that bill goes to a committee.
A committee?
Yeah, it's a group of lawmakers who focus on a specific area like healthcare or education.
So, like, experts in that field look at the bill.
Exactly. They hold hearings,
Hmm.
talk to experts, debate the pros and cons of the bill.
Wow. So it's really thoroughly examined.
Yes. And they might make changes to the bill based on what they learn.
So the bill can be changed even before it goes to the whole Congress.
Right. If the committee approves the bill, then it goes to the floor of the House or the Senate.
And that's where everyone gets to debate it.
Exactly. Lawmakers from both parties representing different parts of the country.
Wow. So it's like a microcosm of the whole country.
In a way, yeah, they debate. The bill proposed changes get really passionate sometimes.
It sounds intense.
It can be, but it's all part of the process.
Of making sure the law represents what the people want.
Right.
So what happens after a bill passes one part of Congress?
Well, it has to go through the same process in the other part.
So if it starts in the House, it has to go to the Senate too.
And the other way around.
And what if they have different versions of the bill?
They have to work it out. They form a conference committee with members from both the House and the Senate.
Oh, wow. So they have to come up with a version everyone agrees on.
Exactly. It's a lot of back and forth.
It sounds like it's really hard to get a law passed.
It is. There are a lot of steps and a lot of different opinions.
But that's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah, it makes sure that laws are carefully considered and have a lot of support.
And even then, the president can still veto it.
True. The president gets the final say.
So after all that work, the president can still say no.
This is the last check in the process.
Wow. But Congress can override the veto.
If they have enough votes, which is tough.
Yeah, we talked about that.
So it's like a final showdown.
This whole system is so amazing.
It's pretty ingenious.
It's like a living organism with all these different parts working together.
And keeping each other in check.
Exactly.
Ooh.
So now let's talk about the third branch.
The judicial branch.
The courts and the judges.
Right.
We talked about the Supreme Court's power of judicial review.
Right. They're big power.
Yeah. But there's a lot more to it.
There is. Let's dive in.
Okay, so tell us about the judicial branch. How does it work and why is it so important? Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about all the different parts of the U.S. government.
The executive, the legislative, the judicial.
And how they all work together with those checks and balances.
Right. It's like a recipe.
It is like a recipe. You need the right amount of each ingredient.
Exactly. You don't want one thing to overpower the others.
But even the best recipes can go wrong sometimes.
True. No system is perfect.
And I'm guessing the U.S. government has its fair share of challenges.
Oh, for sure. Even the best systems face problems, especially in a world that's constantly changing.
Right. So what are some of the big challenges that the U.S. government is dealing with these days?
Well, one of the biggest ones is political polarization.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It's basically the idea that the two major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, have become more and more divided.
Yeah, I've noticed that it seems like they can never agree on anything.
It's like they're speaking different languages.
And it makes it really hard to get anything done.
Exactly. It creates gridlock.
So how does this polarization affect the checks and balances system that we've been talking about?
Well, when different parties control different branches of government, it can lead to a lot of fighting and blocking.
Oh, I see. Like each branch tries to stop the other branches from doing anything.
Right, and that can make it really hard to make progress on important issues.
It's like the system is designed to prevent tyranny, but it can also prevent anything from happening at all.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
And this polarization isn't just limited to politicians, is it?
No, it's spreading to the general public, too.
You're on social media.
Especially on social media, people are only hearing information that reinforces what they already believe.
And it seems like everyone has their own version of the truth these days.
That's another big challenge, the rise of misinformation and disinformation.
So how does all this misinformation affect the government and how our democracy works?
Well, democracy relies on people being informed and making good decisions.
Right.
But when everyone is operating on different sets of facts, it's hard to have productive conversations.
And it erodes trust in institutions.
Exactly. It makes people lose faith in the government and in each other.
This is all pretty depressing. It makes it seem like democracy is in trouble.
It's definitely facing some serious challenges, but I think there's still hope.
Okay, I need some hope right now. What can we do to address these problems and make our democracy stronger?
Well, first, we need to acknowledge that these problems exist and start talking about them openly and honestly.
Okay, so awareness is the first step.
Exactly. We can't fix something if we don't even admit it's broken.
Right, and then what?
We need to promote media literacy and critical thinking skills.
What does that mean?
It means teaching people how to evaluate information from different sources.
Like how to spot fake news.
Right, and how to identify bias and distinguish between fact and opinion.
So we need to be more careful about what we believe and share online.
Absolutely. And we need to hold social media platforms accountable for the spread of misinformation.
They need to do a better job of stopping the spread of lies and harmful content.
Right. They have a responsibility to create environments that promote truth and accuracy.
What about political polarization? What can we do about that?
That's a tough one, but I think it starts with empathy and understanding.
So trying to see things from the other side's perspective.
Exactly. It's easy to demonize people who disagree with us, but we have to remember that we're all in this together.
We're all Americans, and we have to find a way to work together.
Right. And that means having respectful conversations, listening to each other, and trying to find common ground.
It sounds cheesy, but love really is the answer.
Maybe so. But seriously, we need to find ways to reconnect as a nation and rediscover our shared values.
And that brings us back to the importance of being active citizens.
Exactly. It's not enough to just complain about the problems.
We have to get involved and make our voices heard.
Right. Vote, contact your representatives, volunteer in your community, advocate for causes you care about.
We have to participate in our democracy.
It's our civic duty.
This deep dive has been amazing. I've learned so much about how our government works and the challenges it faces.
Me too. It's been a great conversation.
But it's also made me realize how important it is for all of us to be engaged and informed citizens.
Absolutely. Our democracy depends on it.
So to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us on this journey.
Thanks for listening.
And remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who wants to learn more about how our government works.
Spread the knowledge.
And don't forget to follow Allison on Blue Sky YouTube and TikTok for more deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.